Good evening and welcome to our flagship whiskey number 40. Doing something a little different we haven't done in a couple years now, but this is American Single Malt Night. So tonight we're going to talk with four distillers producing American Single Malt amongst other products. This is their flagship American Single Malt product. They felt would best be shared with all of us here, and looking forward to that. Tonight we got a little bit of a change in the schedule. Jenny had a last minute conflict that she couldn't make tonight. So we have Sam Bolt joining us from Virginia Distilling Company. How you doing, Sam?
Doing good, doing good. Glad to be here. Thanks for having us. And I know Jenny wanted to be here and but happy to sub in.
No, that's great. So Sam is going to get this right, the guest experience manager over at Virginia. That's what they're calling you these days?
That's that's what they call me. Yeah. Yeah. So I oversee all the tours and tastings, have a background in production, both beer, wine, and a little distillation. So I have the pleasure of being on site on our beautiful campus and annoying the production as well as the front of house staff. So
That's awesome. All right. We'll come back to Sam in a moment. No stranger of the program from Cedar Ridge is Murphy Quint. How we doing, Murphy?
Hey, great. Glad to be here tonight with you guys.
No, I appreciate that. So the last ABV Network trip up to the distillery didn't shy you away from us at all, did it? I heard they
No,
had a damn
no.
good time up there.
Pulled me closer to you guys. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, hopefully we can get y'all back up here again soon.
No, that's awesome. And how's the weather out there in Iowa? We had 70s in here in Chicago. Not a bad
Man,
weather for the eclipse versus the 40 from yesterday.
that's beautiful eclipse weather today. Wide open skies. It was perfect. But yeah, out here you just never know. I mean, one day it'll be 25. The next day it'll be 70. I think we've got 80s coming next week or something crazy like that. So it's all over the map. And yeah, at some point here tonight, I'll talk about how we utilize that for our whiskey a little bit.
I was about to say, sounds like a great climate for some whiskey aging. That's
You got
awesome.
it.
All right, and another friend of the program from Whiskey Del Bach, we got Mark Vierthaler. How you doing, Mark?
Good, good. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm glad I didn't scare you guys off from me. So
Well, because it was June 2022, June or July 2022 was the last time I think we had you on,
yep.
and then we did a single barrel through the gift shop too as well for the barrel shop, the ABV barrel shop, and I love what you do on social media. By the way, I always laugh and chuckle at some of the stuff when I see you come up and pop up. I'm always looking to see what you're doing now. Because you and your next partner in crime here are the two. These are must follows. So I always, if you give a Whiskey Icarus a follow, trust me, it's worth it.
Appreciate that.
All right, and then last but not least, we're going to have Caitlin Bartlemay from Hood River Distillers. How we doing?
Doing great. I didn't realize that I was part of the crime. I'm on board. I'm on board with part of being Mark's crime team. That sounds like a great idea.
I love what you guys do on social media, just bringing attention to the category, but just having some fun showing what it's like behind the scenes. Caitlin just now she has her first tattoo. If I saw that right.
That is correct. Yeah, I think the funniest thing about that post was one, I was shocked at how many people actually read what I wrote. Another good reminder to be careful what you write on the internet because I didn't think anybody would actually read it. And the other thing was most people's response was, "Oh, I didn't first tattoo. I assumed you already had like many," and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. I'm. That's the kind of vibe I'm giving. All right, I'm on board for it."
Oh, there you go. No, what I love the most about that post was just the I could feel the connection with farm history, farm family, and then distilling and how it all connects together. I thought that would because I also married into a farm family in Central Illinois, so I can, as a city mouse who's learning to be a farm mouse and wanting to put a distillery on the family property as well, because why ship all that grain over for feed and for hogs and pigs? Why don't we start making it into something, pull the spirits out of that grain?
Yeah, no,
I feel for you. That was pretty
absolutely.
cool. I like that.
Yeah, in fact, my parents, even though they had to sell the farm, they still. I don't think the term joke really fits it correctly, but whenever there's a big lottery, they're always like, "Well, we're gonna win the lottery, and then we're gonna build you a distillery." And I'm like, "Mom, don't, no, retire me. Like, I love what I do, but retire me. If you win 1.3 billion dollars in the lottery, I'm okay with retirement."
I'm okay with finding something else to do. That's good.
But yeah, no, that's still like, even though the farm is gone, that's still like top item on their lottery list, which is very, very sweet.
No, no, I love it. No, perfect. So we'll come back to Caitlin at the end. So I guess everybody, if you haven't taken out your sample first, we're going to start with Virginia Distilling Company. For your sample, sit back and relax for the other presenters. I appreciate it. Hopefully, you got your samples you can enjoy with us. And for kind of rules of engagement, if you have any, when we go through the product, we start tasting it, tasting notes, feel free to use the chat. What would you want in there? If you want to put questions in there, I'll look to grab them as well as we go through the presentation for each of our presenters. So that's how the rules of engagement go. Feel free to open up the mic if you need to. If not, we'll have questions and answers at the end once we get through everybody's presentation. Sound like a plan? Wonderful. All right, Sam, what's going on at Virginia Distilling Company? Kind of a loaded
Oh,
question.
yeah. Where do we start, right? With the impending ratification of American single malt whiskey, we're just kind of any day now. But what we're doing on site really is just edifying as best as we can. We've got folks coming in every day with all sorts of information, half correct, all incorrect, wide information across the board. So we kind of start people out, just going over what they know about whiskey and getting it into that single malt vein. That's all we do. So we only import barley, 2 pot stills. The only thing we think about really varying our recipes is the maturation stage. So we focus a lot there, and so like I said, a lot of what we do is edification and going not only here's what's correct with bourbon, but here's what single malt is, and here's where it is in the American single malt realm.
So why don't you take us a little bit through the company itself, the history of the company? Because I've seen Courage and Conviction on the shelf forever. I love the packaging. It seems like it's been out there longer than you think. Well, how long has the company been around? What you focus specifically on single malt? Kind of take us through a little bit of the background of the company, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, yeah. So company broke ground in 2011. This was really a retirement dream of our founder, Dr. George Moore. So Dr. Moore came over from Ireland in the 70s, pursuing an advanced degree. Received that degree, ended up in the technology field. So he actually was one of the first folks in caller ID technology. So sold his company and decided, it's time to get into what he loved, and what he loved was single malt whiskey. So they formed a plan, broke ground, began to build a distillery. But 2 years into the build, Dr. Moore actually tragically passed away. So it was sort of up to his wife, Angela Moore, and their son Gareth to figure out what the heck are we going to do with this distillery. We like whiskey. It's okay to us. He was the one that loved it. So what are we going to do? Really what they said is let's make this the best darn whiskey we can accomplish. So brought in some legends and it started working towards Courage and Conviction. So our first distillation run for Courage and Conviction was 2015. Here we are almost 9 years later, and it took us about 6 or 7 to put out our first American single malt. We had a product in the meantime called VHW. It was blended with Scotch whiskey and younger American single malt whiskey, and in different cask finishings. But here we are, 2020, we rolled out a first look that we called Prelude. And then 2021, around that time, we put out the product you have in front of you. It was American single malt was probably just being discussed back then, but this was really just a passion project, and it worked out for us. We're in the middle of Virginia. The climate's wonderful for what we do. 4 to 6 years, we're in good shape. 6 years annual loss on that barrel, but you can't have maturation without loss. So we're really hitting our stride. Some exciting things are happening. We've got some new product releases coming down the pipeline this year, but everyone's just thrilled, just living in the moment and enjoying the juice.
No, that's awesome. So family tragedy, that thing moves on. What made you guys any insight into the barrel maturation and the secondary finishing, or the first maturation? You have sherry, you got cuvee, you got ex bourbon cask. Anything about the cooperage or anything that you're doing from there? What you're trying to accomplish and how that whole thing works?
Yeah, I think the biggest story is Jim Swan, one of the wisest minds in barrel maturation, helped guide us into our maturation process. So I think the biggest thing the most questions we get are about our STR cask, our cuvee cask. It's a European red wine cask. It gets a layer shaved off, toasted, and charred, so it reactivates those wine sugars, adds another layer of char onto it, so you're bringing in those vanillins. That's the big discussion right now, because I think that's the most, or I'd say least understood cask. I mean, sherry cask, full maturation, which is a little out of the ordinary. It's a full maturation in sherry cask as well as ex bourbon. So those are the big three for us in terms of full maturation. Finishings, we're starting to play around with some finishings, but our core for finishings, we do a cider cask, we do a port cask, a port wine cask, and we've played around with some beer. We call our brewer's batch, and we even have a coffee cask finish that we play around with. So the big three out of our maturation are ex bourbon, cuvee, and sherry, and that's actually what's in this signature malt, and it gives Amanda, our lead blender, the opportunity to really play with those three distinctive flavors and come up with something quite nice as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, I would agree. So I jumped right into the whatever I think what stands out with everybody. What about the fermentation process? Is everything on grain? Are you lautering? What's going on with the fermentation process? Take us from there before we get to the still.
We do lauter, yeah. We stay really traditional in our fermentation process. So mash tun, separate the liquids, pitch yeast onto the liquids. We do one thing that we do differently is we actually use 2 yeast strains that we've selected, and one is focusing on esters. So producing those esters, those fruity apple, pear, banana, clove things going on, and then the other strain is working on alcohol fermentation. So out of everything that I've learned and seen, this is sort of one of the more unique pitches with 2 focuses really going on during that fermentation process. So
nice. So you said double pot stills?
Double pot stills. Yep, handmade in Scotland.
There you go. Nice. And then coming to visit you guys. What's it like coming to visit you? What does a tour look like? Because I know you can answer that one specifically.
I can do that. Yeah, we can do that really well. So yeah, we're sort of in the middle of nowhere. We're in Livingston, Virginia. We're right in between Lynchburg and Charlottesville. So we're on Road 29. So getting to us is not easy, and then getting away from us is even harder at times. So we're also wineries all over the place. But when you come out and see us, we do a number of things. We really try and tailor a tour to what people want to do and see. But the 2 kind of standard tours we have, we call our standard tour and our VIP. VIP, we go up into the cask house. We dive a little bit more into the maturation. Our standard tour is more of a blanketed overall process, get into tasting. And really, I think it works out nicely because, I'll say this now, we've honed it in, but originally our VIP tour consisted of cask strength whiskey only, and we had to backpedal on that pretty quickly once we realized that people are going to sign up for the word VIP no matter what you put on it, right? So it was 11 o'clock in the afternoon, and we had somebody who later told me they didn't drink whiskey at all, and we gave them a nice big sample of 59.9 percent single cask whiskey. So VIP now we do more of the stepping up into the single cask, whereas our standard tour we stay down in more of our signature series vatted products, that 46 ABV stuff. So
Nice.
But 100 acres, beautiful, and we're like I said, we're out in the mountains of Virginia, so lots to see and do along the way.
It's almost like you have to pinch yourself every day going to work. You got to love that.
Oh yeah.
All right, so let's get into the product. You already got some nosy notes coming in here. Fantastic chocolatey bread goodness on this one. Lots of light milk chocolate. toasted biscuits on the nose, a very light and sweet. That's from Darren and then Mark. What else should we be expecting with this spirit?
Yeah, so again, this is a vatting of all three, and it's 50% ex bourbon cask, 25 cuvee, and 25 sherry. And once you get into the sherry, I think sherry kind of comes through this really nicely. So I'm getting some fig, tobacco, definitely milk chocolate. But it is 50% ex bourbon, so you're getting those fruity esters. You're getting apple, pear, some of that banana even from the cuvee, and fermentation. But I love what Amanda's done with this. It's such a great blend of all three, and it showcases all three in a really cool way.
You're right. You got toasted hazelnuts, bits of fruit on the nose. Absolutely. I got chocolate covered everything on this one.
Right.
There's just, but it's not dark chocolate. It's a pure milk chocolate. I think you hit it right there, Mark. It's right on. It almost feels like a dessert in a bottle here right now. So you said the age, the minimum of 3 years. What's the expectation? So obviously American single malt still has to be aged at least 3 years, getting into the category to define the category. What are we expecting from Virginia Distilling Company on an age statement with this one? So minimum of 3 years. What's kind of the mix that you guys are using right now? Because you've had some time to lay down some stock.
Yeah, it's so fun to be a part of getting to taste these casks, because you really are. You're in a snapshot of 4 to 6 years, and anything can happen. So we like to say we let the barrel tell us when it's ready.
Yep.
But there is some. I mean, each cask type behaves somewhat in a particular way. So sherries we see starting to really blossom after 2. Some need an additional 2. Some are good after 3. But we've really only been at this 8.5 years. So we're still learning the way that a lot of these casks behave in our climate, and especially these STRs and bourbons. But it's starting to creep up into 4 to 6, and just depending on that snapshot of the 4 to 6 time frame, we see variation.
No, I love it because this group knows that age doesn't necessarily matter. It's what you're looking at, what taste that you're looking at. So age statements don't matter. It's just curious to see how this stuff is rolling, because I think Jason, I think you hit it best. It's like opening a bag of Chips Ahoy cookies. Hashtag fat guy tasting notes, right? Bruce is thinking like fine cigars, berries and banana and clove. Sherry's right up in the nose. Mark's just hitting it right up. Just seems like he knows what he's doing. And the cuvee really comes through on the finish. Brilliant dram. He's obsessed with the finish. It's so bright and long lasting. So I haven't dipped into this one yet, but if you haven't yet, cheers. Let's go get them. Man. Ooh. How's this not selling out on all the stores, all the store shelves out there is beyond me.
This
one
fun.
has its This one's popping all over the place. Any idea what landed you guys on 92 proof for the expression to put in the bottle? Just with the blend, how it landed out right?
It's a couple reasons. Amanda loves that ABV, but I do know from a scientific standpoint, you don't have any of those proteins precipitating out below 46. So that's, people like their whiskey clear, and we don't like those hazy proteins. So minimum, that's where we like it. We've played with some other ABVs. Even our double cask reserve goes a little bit higher, and then of course our single cask is cask strength. So getting to see where across the board where we've proofed these, it's a happy place at 92.
It's just what I love about the American single malt category is that these flagship whiskeys, they're not landing on 80 proof like some of our cousins over on other shores. We're doing different things. We're trying different proof points for that more of a. Yeah, this thing is just lively. It pops all over the place, and it's a lot to think about in this one. This one's definitely a thinker.
Yeah. Absolutely.
No, right on. All right. Anything else we need to know about Virginia Distilling Company before we move on? Anything else that you have about that American Single Malt Academy? I took my test. I got that stuff done. I thought that's pretty cool.
Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, we do this on a daily basis, edifying, and we're we've got the American Single Malt Commission, and but this has been a cool thing, the ASM Academy, for people to we didn't realize we were going to get so many international submissions. So we're shipping diplomas and pins internationally, and they're just something we never thought we would see. So the response has been great. We have a wonderful team, and everyone's excited to be a part of this movement and working together. We always say that this just seems like a team effort within the ASM world. Everybody's excited and just very, very cooperative. So, I love seeing things from my perspective. I know there's some things that I miss from some of our meetings on site, but it's a tight knit group, and excited to see where things evolve to over the next few years.
I love it. Yeah. So, folks listening out there, you can go to the American Single Malt Academy, search for it. You can get to the website, listen to the different courses that they have to take you through the category, and then once you finish off, they send you a nice little pin, nice little something for the effort. But it definitely gets you education into the category, because as we know, is what some of our friends have done on the bourbon steward side. This is all about education. And I think in American Single Malt category, you cannot speak enough about trying to meet people where they're at. And this is not your grandfather's Scotch or blended Scotch or anything like that. I think the folks on here already know that, but the folks that listen after this, give this stuff a try. I'll tell you that, because what a way to kick us off. Sam, appreciate it.
Yeah,
sit back and relax now.
All right.
You got it.
Thanks.
All right. Shifting over to Murphy Quint over at Cedar Ridge. Oh, the places you will go, Mr. Quint. So what I appreciate most is the last social media post I saw of you guys was the Whiskey Magazine 2024 Best American Single Malt. Not a bad thing to carry for the category. But before we get to that stuff, how we've come to where we're at right now, why don't we take a little history about the distiller, where you guys have come from?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I want to mention that I'm really happy to be here tonight with this group of presenters, some people that I really look up to and admire, and have gotten to know pretty well over the years. So this is a ton of fun for me. So I'm Murphy Quint. I'm the master distiller at Cedar Ridge Distillery. To tell you a little bit about our distillery, the history of it, we've kind of had a pretty bizarre history. We started up in 2005, and the thing that I'll kind of lead with is back then, I mean, this whole boom was so new that no one, including us, really know where this was all going. So there's been quite a progression and a lot of evolution along the way. Where we're at today is nowhere near where we thought we were going when we first opened this business. And so my parents, Jeff and Lori, they started Cedar Ridge back in 2001, 2002 as actually a vineyard. The whole thing was they were going to grow grapes. And my family has a long history in the ag industry. My grandparents on both sides are lifelong farmers, as are their grandparents. So, being in Iowa, we're tied to the land. And my dad has always had a deep love and appreciation for wine. And so I think, I'll also throw a little bit of like a nod to maybe midlife crisis in there. I think he was wanting to do something that was just kind of his thing. He wanted to plant these vineyards, and, if he never was able to retire and he had these vineyards to tend to, that would be a happy life for him. I kind of remember him talking about things like that. So he really started out as a vineyard. Well, one thing led to another, and it's like, well, if you've got vines, you might as well have a winery as well. And so in 2005, we opened up Cedar Ridge Winery to sell the wine made from the grapes that we were growing. And a differentiating hook that we had was, in addition to being a winery, we were also a very small distillery, right? We were focused on making these Iowa-grown grapes, Iowa-made wines. But while you're here, you can try some of our cool, really small spirits. And that was just our little family business in 2005. Well, obviously, things have really shifted a lot since then. We've gone from a wine focus very much to a whiskey focus. However, we do still to this day make some wine. And that's always important for me to mention in these talks, because our wine production absolutely influences the way that we make whiskey. So while we've evolved and transitioned a lot over the years, we always say that we're whiskey rooted in wine. We use some wine yeast. We have a lot of winemakers that are involved in our whiskey process. So we're definitely whiskey influenced by wine. So and we've also gone from this very, very small family-owned business to a fairly sizable distillery located out here in Iowa. I know some of you have been here, and hopefully we can get the rest of you here at some point. We've expanded to a pretty nice campus out here with about 55 employees, and we're going around the clock making whiskey and wine all day, all night.
Wow, it's amazing to see the growth. So I went to Augustana College in the Quad Cities. So I got a nice little special place in the heart for Iowa. I've got some family members that live outside of Des Moines as well. And you got to love the Iowa Cubs, don't you?
You gotta love the Iowa Cubs, especially because the Cubs have such a good farm system. The Iowa Cubs are pretty good right now. Yeah, big Cubs fan. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So you also have a love of stand-up comedy as well, if my memory serves me right. So did you?
That's absolutely correct. Yep.
So what made you become a distiller instead of a stand-up comic?
I'm just all the times that I bombed on stage. Like, no, no. I just, I love them both. I've learned though that not every hobby has to become a career, and I'm not, believe it or not, that was something that was very difficult for me to accept. I find these things that I really love, and I want to just get fully immersed in them. And it's tough sometimes to draw a boundary and say, you know what, I like this, and this is a career, and I like this, and this is just a hobby. I'll just watch this. I'll watch my stand-up comedy. But no, very much enjoy stand-up. My wife and I, we have 3 kids, so we very rarely get out of the house these days. But when we do, it's usually we go to stand-up comedy, which is a lot of fun.
I think some of your best world-known brand ambassadors over at, let's say, a little place called Heaven Hill and a little place called Limestone Branch Distillery with Yellowstone also are former stand-up comedians at one point in time. And what do you
Yeah.
know? Start selling
Yep.
hooch. It's amazing how
You
you can tell a story and you can make it happen, make it come alive. I love it.
Storytelling goes a long way. Yep.
That's right. So the production side on how you're making your whiskey, can you take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a few things to consider here. And one, I'll start with, while, we're here talking about single malt tonight, and I am a single malt guy, our distillery is really a bourbon distillery. That's really what got Cedar Ridge started. I mentioned earlier we were very wine focused. Well, what really transitioned that is when we started producing Iowa bourbon from Iowa grown corn. And that really took us to the next level and kind of put us on the map. Since then, we've transitioned into single malt. So we produce a number of different whiskeys here. We're very bourbon focused, but let me kind of dive into the general production stuff, and then we can talk about single malt. But
Yep.
We obviously double distill all of our whiskeys. We have Carl pot stills here. We've got a 800-gallon alpha still and a 200-gallon finishing still that we utilize for all of our whiskey production, regardless of which style we're producing. When we started producing bourbon, this is actually very uncommon. Bourbon is typically fermented and distilled on grain. That is the traditional method of producing bourbon. Well, we did not do that. We've always done an off-grain bourbon. So we lauter our bourbon, which, there's more and more people doing that these days. And admittedly, that really started out of necessity. And like most craft distilleries, we started using the equipment that we had access to produce the whiskey that we could make with it back at that point in time. But we learned how to do it pretty well. And then fast forward to when we started doing single malt as well, we kind of had the perfect setup for producing an off-grain single malt. It was a nice, easy transition. So we do produce all of our whiskeys off-grain, from bourbon to rye to wheat to single malt. And I will say, if you're crazy enough to produce rye off-grain like we are, you're in for a really fun ride. It's just wildly inefficient and an absolute nightmare. But
I can only imagine. How foamy can that get?
It just gums up and becomes a giant brick in there. No, I've got I'm lucky to have such an incredibly skilled and patient team of distillers who have gotten quite good at working all of our whiskeys, rye being very much included. So yeah, that's we do an off grain, and then I want to touch on our aging a little bit. We do non-climate controlled aging, no temperature control, no humidity control, and that in itself is not that unique. There's plenty of distilleries out there doing that, but we're big on tying our whiskey in general to the state of Iowa. And with things like bourbon, we kind of double dip there because we also use Iowa corn. But when you get over to single malt, that's not an option, obviously, because single malt is made from 100% malted barley. And in the state of Iowa, unless you somehow really incentivize a farmer to grow something else, they really only grow corn or soybeans here. That's if you teleport to a random location in the state of Iowa, you're probably going to land in a cornfield. There's a lot of corn out here. So we didn't have that natural tie from the grain. So one thing that we do to kind of tie our whiskey to a sense of place to the state of Iowa is this non-climate controlled aging. And so our rick houses, they're pole sheds essentially. So very thin steel buildings. The temperature indoors is the exact same as outdoors. and that's fairly aggressive in the state of Iowa. In July we'll usually hit 100 degrees once or twice, and then in the peak of winter, I mean, we felt -16, -17 at one point this winter. So our barrels are exposed to that the whole way, and there are definite pros and cons to it. It's a trade-off, but one pro is that you couldn't get that particular fingerprint from Mother Nature in any other location. Just like if someone do it in Texas, we wouldn't be able to replicate their process like they wouldn't be able to replicate ours. So the non-climate controlled aging that we're utilizing, it's important to us because it ties us to the state of Iowa as well.
What's that level of humidity we get in the Midwest? What's that angel share look like? What are you getting for evapor loss? Is it crazy? Like
it can be, so it's interesting. I mean, we have very humid summers, very dry winters. So there's like an on and off, just like there is cold to hot. We usually see on a 4-year aged product, we usually see about 22 to 24% of loss. Now, keep in mind, I mentioned earlier, our brick houses are basically pole sheds, very thin steel. Because of that construction, the temperature swings, they're felt by the barrels immediately. If we had, say, brick walls or any sort of insulation, that'd be a very slow and gradual transition, and that'd be a lot easier on the expansion and contraction of the barrels. But because it's so immediate due to those thin walls, we do get a little bit more leakage and seepage because it's really, really quick expansion and contraction, and that causes some leakage in addition to just to angel shares. So that's going to be factored in there. But yeah, about 22 to 24% is our average.
Wow. Yeah. So what's the barrel entry proof that you're doing to try to counterbalance some of that? Have you different barrel entry proofs for the different products that you found that work best, or what does that look like from your decisions there?
Yeah. So as of right now, we're exclusively 120 proof on entry proof. Now, my team and I have been talking a lot about it, and I always say that this is the year that we start to experiment a little bit more, and then we just never get around to it. But we do intend to play around and do some experimentation with different entry proofs. It's just, and I know the other distillers on here will kind of know what I'm talking about. And that's once you kind of dial into a system, it's tough to start playing with the variables when you're already happy with the product you're making. So especially when you don't get to see the final product until years later, right? So if we switch from 120 proof to say 115, and we do that for the next 4 years, we're not going to know if that was a good or bad adjustment to make until 4 years from now. And all the inventory we've made in the meantime is going to be different. So it's always a very high stakes decision to make. Really, the safe way to do it is to just do a little bit here and there, and then kind of create balance on the blending side of things. So that's probably the route that we'll go. But as of right now, exclusively 120 proof.
Wow, that's something. So once you take us through this product here, what should we be expecting on this one? So this is the quintessential signature blend.
All
we
right.
had the Barley's pick at the ABV Barrel Shop, but this one's nosing a little different. This one's something. This one's fun.
Yeah, that Barley's pick barrel is a huge hit. I have a couple bottles of that have been pretty popular around here. But okay, so this is our quintessential signature blend, and I'll start by saying that our quintessential single malt is more of a program than a particular product. This product is our signature blend of the quintessential program. That'll make a little bit more sense in a second here. But what we're trying to do in this quintessential single malt program is we're trying to create a significant variety of barrels in our aging inventory of single malt. So all of our single malt, or 95% of our single malt, is going to start out in used bourbon barrels. Every now and then we'll put some away and new charred casks as well, but we really like to start with used barrels for this particular process. And for about the first 4 to 4.5 years, it sits in those barrels. After that, we transfer it over into a variety of finishing casks. Like I just said, the goal is to get a significant variety. Obviously, we use sherry butts, port pipes. We use brandy casks, rum casks. We have our own winery here, so we use our own wine barrels. We use other people's wine barrels, Hungarian oak, French oak, you name it, we're finishing single malt in it. So we do that for another couple years. And now we've got an option of what we want to do with these barrels at the end of the process. That's kind of the program that I'm alluding to. If we want to put them in the signature blend, we will taste what is in our Solera vat, which is an 1,100 gallon wooden vat that we have on site. We'll taste the whiskey that's in there, and we'll determine which of those finishing casks should be aged to the vat to create the best overall batch. So the batch that we're having right now, I believe this is batch 13. And the way that I always say it is batch 13, 14, and 15 will probably be fairly similar to one another. But batch 13 versus 33 or 43, they'll actually be quite different because we're adding different casks to this vat over time, and it's going to slowly manipulate and evolve the flavor profile into something else. Now, the casks that we don't use for the signature blend, which is what we're having right now, we can take those to market in a few different ways. We can create cool special releases, like we just had one that was called Portside that did really well for us, which was Ruby Port, French Oak, and then Amontillado Sherry. Or we can do some single cask releases like the one that you just alluded to that was at the barrel shop. So that's kind of the program of this all. But the signature blend that we're having right now, just a quick repeat, Reader's Digest, they go from bourbon casks to finishing casks, an assortment, and then we marry them into our Solera vat to create a final batch. So hopefully you're getting something that's very complex and layered, even though it's a 92 proof, which I also, just like Virginia Distillery there was saying, I'm also a big fan of 92 proof. And hopefully you can find layers and complexity in here. Hopefully you can find influence from brandy casks, influence from sherry, rum, or port casks. That's what we're going for in here by utilizing all those different finishing casks, obviously.
I can only imagine what your blending room looks like.
Well, I'll tell you, it's the floor space is too small, and I think that's pretty much what every distiller who has ever lived feels, is that the floor space is too small. But we do have a lot of really fun barrels, and it's fun to jam them all in the room, make space for them, taste through them, and then add them into that vat. It's a really, really fun time.
No, that's something. So Darren came off hot all right off the bat with saying beautiful red fruit notes, and almost like some fresh cut strawberries on angel food cake. Also finishes with some classic malty notes. Mark had pink starburst on the nose and the palate. I cannot agree more with that. Both those. I had like the angel food cake with a little whipped cream on top, little strawberries on there. But the wax paper there, when you take that that pink starburst, it's that wax paper with that's there. That's what I'm landing on. Kyle Neely thinks you need to.
Go ahead.
Kyle Neely thinks you need to make this into a scented candle to put in the gift shop. So.
I
that's
like
when he draws his baths at 105 degrees specifically for Kyle Neely. So,
I love it. And I'll say that my brain has been shattered. I have never picked up a pink starburst note, and now that is all I get. And this is my own product, and I've never come up with that note, and now I smell so much of it. And luckily, I absolutely love pink starburst. So that's phenomenal.
And from the Ewald's, pear on the nose from Dave, and spiced cooked fruit. Darren had a question for you. What percentage of your barrels you have right now are sitting as American single malt?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So we have about 7,500 barrels on property total, and about 80%, 75 to 80% of those are bourbon. So I'm no mathematician, but the remaining 25% ish are going to be single malt.
You're busy little bees over there.
Yeah. We're, like I said, we've been going around the clock for a few years now. We're very, so one thing I did touch on a little bit is our bourbon business. I know that that's not what we're here to talk about tonight, but it is
fire away. Keep it going.
What I'm about to say, and that's, we're very fortunate. I've really had the ability to kind of have a safety blanket when it comes to single malt. And I've really been able to be patient and just kind of take my time with this because we've had a very established bourbon business. We're very fortunate. The Iowans, they really came out and they supported us from day one when we released our bourbon. And by having that revenue coming in and keeping our lights on and our staff employed, it's allowed us to kind of branch out and explore other categories by slowly dipping our toes in the water rather than having to jump in, which can also actually work really well to just kind of jump in and fully commit. But I do like and appreciate the ability to just kind of go slow with this, just because we already have our bourbon portfolio. I don't know what our quintessential single malt is going to become at Cedar Ridge or to the state of Iowa or to the country one day, but I do like that we can take a slow, very patient and strategic approach, and that is in large part due to our bourbon brand. So that has been a nice thing that's kind of helped kick this single malt off.
Yeah, I can tell you. I remember Whiskey Fest Chicago. I want to say it was 2018 is when we first wouldn't consider myself in the industry at all. I was just a fan of everything. And I just remembered most of the question that you were getting is I didn't know Iowa could make bourbon. I thought it only came from Kentucky. And then they taste your product and they go absolutely nuts with it. And it's funny to see like, wow, this is amazing. I
Yeah.
thought only that other place. I thought they were the only Iowa distiller out there. And it's just amazing to see where you've come to what you've been doing, how you've been utilizing the winery, and how, I mean, just the sustainability, everything you guys have going on, and that whole little complex that you got going on there too. I keep on hearing about it. I just haven't been able to get out there yet, but this is on the list for the summer, for damn sure.
Well, hopefully we can get you out here. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just tell the wife and kids that we need to go visit distilleries on vacation and not just colleges and other things. It's more important things to do. I can write it off a business expense then.
Yeah. See
But
how that goes over. Yeah. Yeah.
yes. And so Caitlin came in here with earthy milk chocolate, raspberries and cream, barley straw, redwood, Concord grapes, a kiss of orange blossom, and char with a whisper of a pink rose on the finish. Somebody
I love
call the
it.
marketing department, take that snapshot, and there you go. I love it.
I love
No,
I love it.
this is spectacular. So, I guess last question: what can we expect coming out here? What's new? What can we expect to look forward to? What gets you most excited right now that you have going? Whether it be visitation at the distillery, what you guys got going on, or products, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. There's always so much going on here and in the industry in general. And I'm really excited about what our team's doing right now. One thing that we're really good at is making quick and hard pivots when we need to do them. That's something that we've been really good at doing over the years. And we've recently pivoted our distribution model. So we've launched up with a new distribution team, and we're, going a little bit more sub-national. So we've been putting a lot of time and effort into that, into training distributors and getting out and working with them and being active. So it's been taking a lot of time and energy, but it's been really fun and rewarding to see. As far as products go, the thing that I'm most excited about is our quintessential special release. So like I said, we just had our quintessential signature blend. That's the one we just tasted. The most recent special release we did was called Portside. It went over pretty well, and I'm getting ready to release the next one here. I haven't finalized the actual blend yet. My title here is Master Distiller. I personally feel like I'm more of a blender. That's what I really enjoy doing, is the actual blending of the final product. And so I'm working on one, and the focal point of this concept I'm kicking around is Madeira focused. And the real fun thing about that is that some of the barrels involved, we actually, being a winery, we make a Madeira inspired wine at Cedar Ridge. I'll say it's not technically Madeira because we're not there, but we make a very similar wine inspired by Madeira production, and we're using some of those casks to finish our single malt in this next special release. So stay tuned for that. There will be more information coming on down the line here. Just haven't finalized that blend, and as soon as I do, hopefully you'll hear about it.
There you go. And the Ewald's kind of put a stamp on this one. When Pete married Sherry for the win, they love that one.
That is my all-time favorite release from Cedar Ridge. That really means a lot to me to hear. So thank you for that. That was so the first ever quintessential special release we did was just a play on words and spelled like the names Pete and Sherry married. Literally just a marriage of peated single malt with first fill of Amontillado sherry, and that's the one that I am most proud of. One, because I really think it's a good product, but also two, because it was really the first one. It was the first one that kind of got this new wheel turning and this new line of single malt out there, and I'll forever be grateful to that. So I'm glad to hear that someone out there appreciates it. Thank you.
Awesome, Murphy. Thanks for the time, Murphy. We really appreciate this one. This is a hell of an expression. Looking forward to seeing that next signature blend too as well. And anything in Hungarian oak. I'm very interested in Hungarian oak these days. It's amazing how porous that stuff is, and how funky this stuff comes off of that too. So right on, brother. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
All right, folks, we're going to moving west across the country to Arizona, in Tucson, Arizona, with Mark Vierthaler from Whiskey Del Bach. How you doing, Mark?
I am doing well. Thank you all so much for having me here today. And everything that Murphy just talked about, I'm going to talk about how it's the complete opposite where we are. So,
well, keep it rolling. What's that stuff that makes the Arizona climate different and your production side different, and how things are going with that?
yeah, so one of the things that I always feel like I have to talk about when I talk about what we're doing at Whiskey Del Bach is the whole distillery. Like the product that we make comes from a very profound love of the Southwest. Our co-founders, Stephen Paul and his daughter Amanda Paul, like so Stephen, a little bit of background, he was a carpenter here in town. Specifically, he worked with mesquite wood. And Elaine, his wife, who now says she will never have ideas out loud again. One night they were burning some of the leftover wood from the furniture shop. So mesquite, you're cooking. It's so prevalent out here in the Southwest. And Elaine kind of looked at Stephen and said, hey, you know, they dry malt over peat. Has anyone ever considered drying malt over mesquite? And if you've ever met Stephen, he is the type of person that is going to get obsessed with something, and he's going to be very interested in the process. And so what he ended up doing is he ended up teaching himself to malt, taught himself how to floor malt, taught himself how to distill. And he actually really started out with an unsmoked American single malt. Smoke is divisive. It's actually one of the things we'll kind of touch in with this release. For us being inspired by a mesquite smoked single malt, the sample that I put out for everybody is one of our unsmoked, but that's kind of where it began. Specifically, they drank Macallan 12. That was kind of their go-to single malt when they were cooking, when they were entertaining. And so Stephen had this idea of a mesquite smoked single malt, but also had this idea of an unsmoked single malt that would not be similar in terms of, say, flavor profile, palate, things like that, but more in terms of quality. And so he started doing this, I want to say back in 2006, 2007. By the time 2011 rolled around, Amanda, who was in New York, was like, hey, we're getting some good attention about this. He'd only been kind of distilling on a very small scale here in Tucson. She was like, let's make this a business. And so in 2011, Hamilton Distillers, which is our overarching company, was founded, and then Whiskey Del Bach was born. And to kind of like bring that back into that idea of place, one of the things we really try to focus on, one of the things we try to be very aware of is the cool thing about making American single malt is even if you're really, I mean, you have four ingredients. You have malted barley, yeast, water, and a barrel. But within this very small, very specific these constraints, you can create something that is completely different. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is, you know, following that Scottish model, going into used cooperage, double copper pot distillation. I will always tell people we were inspired by the Scottish model. We do off-grain fermentation. We utilize yeast strains that are specifically bred for high temperature fermentation. We're in the desert. We're trying to really get those esters, get those interesting flavors. We will do then off-grain fermentation, off-grain distillation, double copper pot. But where we break with tradition is we are going into brand new medium plus toast, number 3 char oak. Not only that, we're going into cork casks. We're going into 15-gallon barrels. So we've talked, you have these very kind of narrow fluctuations of temperature. We're in the Sonoran Desert. Like we have 30 to 40 degree shifts in 24 hours. I would say like I will get up in the morning and there's frost on my truck and I will go home and I'm in a t-shirt. So what would be, in fact, what a lot of people kind of phrase it to us as, what are your challenges? We try to lean into and make them opportunities. And so we go into these smaller format barrels. We go in at 110. You know, we're 55%. We're trying to maximize those wood sugars. We're trying to maximize those tannins, because when you have those 30 to 40 degree shifts, you have so much interaction with that wood. And so we're actually aging a relatively young product, but at least to us is very complex and very layered and nuanced.
That's amazing. Yeah, so we always off grain. So far, 3 for 3 off grain, 3 for 3 double pot stills. What I love the difference here is barrel size being 15 gallons on top of that. Temperature variations of 40 plus. And what's interesting here is the first 3 expressions is you're not smoking or stopping the germination process of barley with peat. In this expression, how did you stop that germination process? What did you use on this one to stop that process?
So when we actually started, we did do 100% of our malting in-house.
Okay.
As of right now, we've basically limited it to our smoked expressions. So
Gotcha.
when we utilize smoked malt, we are still doing that smoking in-house. We realized pretty quickly malting takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of space, and it is a whole nother level of artistry. So we realized pretty quickly we couldn't scale. So our unsmoked malt comes from two different malt houses. It comes from Great Western Malting up in the Pacific Northwest, and we also get from Tex Malt in Dallas
Gotcha.
Fort Worth.
Yeah.
So that is where we are getting our unsmoked, which is what is featured in tonight's
Yep.
dram.
Yep. Yeah, because I know I think Leopold's one of the last ones that are still hand malting everything. You take a look at the monkey shoulders on those gents and gals.
God.
It's something else.
Well,
I don't know how they're
and
doing
then they
it.
just did this amazing session on malted corn, so they're not
Yes.
just doing barley.
No, it's amazing. It's he's something, and happy to see you having graduated to the overalls as well yet too. So that's good. Well, your story, Mark. So you weren't necessarily born in, if memory serves me right, you're not a native to Tucson. You came from other places. So what brought you to Whiskey Del Bach?
Yeah, no, I've been really, really lucky. So I've been here at Whiskey Del Bach for the last 3 years. I've been distilling for 8 and been in the industry for 14. So, it's strange to think back on and realizing most of my adult life has been within the whiskey industry. But yeah, I was in the right place, the right time. I was working in public relations and marketing for an agricultural company back in my hometown of Dodge City, Kansas. So not too far from St. Louis. And yeah, like I had been working in PR and marketing. I'd been involved in the spirits industry. My wife and I ran a very small bar program that was really focused around craft distilleries, craft cocktails. And there were 3 farmers that basically decided, hey, we're going to take our grain that we're growing and we are going to make alcohol with it. We're going to make gin, we're going to make whiskey. And I got a phone call one day and they were like, hey, booze, agriculture. Have you ever considered consulting? Come in, taste this, say it's good, say it's bad. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing.
How do I sign me up?
And
yeah.
I mean, yeah, like it was an immediate, like, yes, this is absolutely outstanding. I would love to do this. And I think maybe 2 days later, not even 48 hours, they posted for a part-time events manager and a part-time assistant distiller. And so I called the farmer that I knew and I basically said, hey, I have a proposition. How about instead of these 2 part-time jobs, you bring me on as your director of marketing and you bring me on as your distiller? And he was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I walked away from PR and marketing and I just immediately fell in love with it. It was this just absolute amazing blend of artistry and science, and having come from bartending, having come from writing about it, that idea of creating things that brings people together, it was almost immediate. And so I was at Boot Hill for 3 years, and then I got hired away to take over as head distiller at 10th Ward Distilling in Frederick, Maryland, just outside of Baltimore. And I was head distiller there for 3 years. Kind of was interested in like branching out, seeing what else I could do. So I started doing some consulting work. And one day I get a phone call out of the blue from a friend and mentor, Maggie Campbell. If you're out there, you're amazing. But she was like, hey, I know you mentioned you were interested in getting back into the day-to-day. Have you ever considered the desert Southwest?
Wow. Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, I can't say I've considered it, but it's not off the table. I'd be interested. And so she said, well, there's a whiskey distillery out there that's looking for a head distiller. And if you're willing, I'm doing some consulting, I'd love to put your name into the hat. And I talked to my wife, and I'm very lucky. I have an amazing partner who has now moved across the country twice for my job. Just like, yeah, no, that sounds amazing. Let's try this. And it was just immediately taken. Stephen and Amanda and Elaine are just the most wonderful people you could ever meet, just like genuinely amazing human beings. Our CEO came from High West, Kent, and so he had that knowledge of the industry. He's also just I always say it sounds like I'm being a kiss ass, but I promise it's genuinely meant. Like, it's just a great
Yeah.
team. It's a really great leadership team. It's a really great ownership team, and yeah, I was lucky enough they selected me. And again, breaking with Murphy is absolutely right. If you are changing recipes, do it slowly. I came in and was like, hey, look at all these levers. Can I start messing with these? And they were flexible enough that we changed our yeast strain, we changed our entry proof, we changed a couple of other things, and I have this distinct memory. I remember the night before our first harvest. Like, I made all these changes, and I looked at my wife and I said, "Hey, honey, just so you know, either tomorrow is going to go really, really well, or I'm fired. Just so you're prepared."
No, that's something. You can tell. I can tell you're not kissing ass because I actually can feel the passion and the genuine authenticity coming through. When you have a team that's performing well, you know it and you feel it, and then usually it's nice when some other people recognize it. What are the American Distillers Institute? You got 4 golds out of this last
Yeah,
year. Seemed like you guys were just
ACSA, the
hoovering
American
up
Craft Spirits
awards like
Association.
crazy.
Yeah, that was insane. We submitted 6 whiskeys, we brought 4 golds and 2 bronzes. So everything we submitted medaled, which was huge and just humbling.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's 15-gallon barrels. What does that look like from the production side, from the aging side? You got to be moving quick on some of that stuff. I would assume with the
Oh yeah,
time that you
yeah,
have down there.
100%. I always put this caveat. People will be like, "Oh, smaller format means faster aging. Smaller format means faster extraction." Like,
Correct.
that's Mother Nature. You can't cheat Mother Nature. What you can do, though, is you can kind of lean into those opportunities. So because we are going to smaller format, we make very narrow cuts. You can let those heads and those tails kind of esterify. You can let them really become complementary and interesting and oxidize in a full 53. When you're in a 15, we start doing sensory at 10 months.
Hmm.
Our average for our core expressions is 12. The longest we're going to let that roll is 15. And what happens is, again, because we can get this really quick interaction with the oak and this very interesting layered flavor profile really quickly, it is also within this like tiny iota where you have to harvest. That if you're at all familiar with aging, it goes in a
Mhm.
sine wave. You'll have your peaks, you'll have your valleys, and ideally you're harvesting and blending when you're in those peaks. And it can be a matter of days when you're in those smaller format of
Mhm.
tasting it and going, no, this isn't quite where we want it. And then going, oh God, we just let it sit too long. No, we have to figure out something to do with it.
Yeah.
So we try to be very aware with that. It always makes me happy when we're talking more about blending. Like, I think blending is a long time coming of people recognizing how much that impacts the quality of the final product. So we have very aggressive interaction. Also means we have really, really aggressive angel share. We are averaging about 15% a year. I've got a couple of barrels that are now about to hit 4 years old, and they're about 50% gone. So the thing that lends those really aggressive, really interesting, to me, very nuanced layers of flavor, it comes with a price.
Sure, of course. I just love that we can finally say the word blending instead of mingling or marrying, or let's just call it small batch. So let's be honest. So it's nice that we can finally say that because that's truly where some of this artwork is really happening, where you can take various different barrels and create these new products on top of that stuff. And like you're doing with your finishing in cherry bodas. What in this expression here and in this because you've had a couple of the Frontera expressions before. Is this a specific? This is a blending line that you have that's a unique expression of various different batches that you're doing.
Yeah, so this is what we call our global cask collection. It's kind of this idea. So we have what we call our distillers cuts, which tend to be very, very small, very limited, available only at the distillery. And we wanted to find a way to kind of expand that reach. And so we sat down and we went through man, 3 or 4 years worth of distillers cuts releases, and we then started basically crunching numbers. Okay, what did people like? What were they interested in? And so one of the ones we came down on was a Pedro Jimenez finish. That came out a couple of years ago, and just people loved it. And so the thought process was, obviously we're really proud of our core expressions. That is, it's what we make day in, day out. But how can we kind of, again, play with those knobs, and like how can we turn things up or down? And we had a third use sherry, both a second and a first. And so we basically started laying our classic down, which is what we call our unsmoked, is classic. And this is such an obnoxious answer. People ask us, well, how long are you finishing? And I say until it's ready. That can be anywhere from 6 months in that first use, all the way up to 18 months in that third, fourth, fifth use.
Sure.
And so the idea is to be relatively consistent, but also just seeing what we can do to kind of tease out some of those flavors, and again, continue to add to that complexity for the whiskey. So this is batch 3. This is our third year we've done the Frontera. And yeah, it's a mix of, I think we've got a fourth use, a third use, and a first use. So it was all focused around, obviously, first use, you have these, oh my God, this is nothing but sherry. Like, that's all I'm getting on it. And then that fifth use, you're like, okay, I kind of get a slight hint at it. And so kind of bringing those together to create something that's a little more balanced, a little that's, I hope, not overfinished. Like, that's one of my little pet peeves as a distiller, is it can be very easy to overfinish things, but finding that balance where that core product comes through, but it is enhanced by that finish. That's kind of the goal.
It's nose and notes here. Kalen just absolutely kills this. You could write, this is like a poem. Strawberries from Ethereal Plains, sweet barbecue ribs, unsalted Triscuits. I've never had an unsalted Triscuit, but I trust you on that one. Candied pecans, I get that because I got some of that cream corn as well, but a spice on there and the chili powder, you hit it right. That's something there. Darren McCroy came in with juicy fruit gum, and that's what everybody knows. It's like there's always some expression that comes out with juicy fruit gum or fruit striped gum. This group is known for that one. The sherry barrel really shines through on the finish for Darren. That cream sweet corn is spot on that one. I got like a spice on it too as well, which I Kaylee hit it right with that chili powder. What was anybody else getting out there? Oh wow. It's interesting how this one hits right in the middle of the palate.
Mm-hmm.
It just stands there and it just does its thing. And then it kind of sits down on the couch and says, yeah, we're going to be here for a while.
It's one of the advantages of using the new oak, that you really do get kind of those bolder, more aggressive flavors, those baking spices, those vanillas.
Yep.
But again, to me, it's also I keep coming back to balance. It's finding that balance. It's that you still want the substrate to shine through. You still want like that malt to come through, and you don't want it to be nothing but all I'm tasting is the barrel. And to me, it's one of the reasons I've kind of fallen in love with the Frontera, is understandably PX, so Pedro Jimenez, that is a very, very heavy, very rich, very sweet sherry. Our classic is already heavy in like dark chocolate, stone fruit. But for whatever reason, you do get a little bit of a lift from that PX finish.
Yeah. Darren had a question. How did you land on a 97 proof for this one?
So we played with this one a lot. We actually boosted the proof between year 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. As you add water, if you do put this over rocks as well, you're going to start noticing that sherry influence come through a lot more. And that first year, like, we were really happy with it, but again, almost immediately with the addition of ice or water, you saw that kind of walnut, that sweet sherry note come through a lot more. Boosting it up to 97 really let our whiskey, I think, shine through a little bit more, that it became a little bit more pronounced and it wasn't so defined by the PX finish.
I can completely agree. It's not overpowering at all. It just hits the right note that, like I said, it separates itself from. Uh, just taste this one. Like I get that it's almost like a roasted peanut too, as well on the palate for me on this one. But I love that I love the fruit notes, like the yeast. You said the yeast strains you're using, everything for the higher temperature. I think that just makes everything plays well with this one. So happy to have you on the map. This is
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, this has been awesome, and I love being able to talk about it. So yeah, it's thank you.
No, that's exactly right. So I appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for taking us through this, and then we'll move on to Caitlin here, and then open up for questions here once we're done. So I appreciate the time. Caitlin, how you been?
Keeping it real. How are you?
Keeping it real by keeping it real as well. So moving into Oregon here, and congratulations on the 90th birthday of Hood River Distillers.
Thank you.
And clearly you've been there since it started because you started. It looks like it's a work release program, but you just keep on getting younger. That's why you're drinking. That's why you're drinking whiskey.
Well, bless you.
Yeah, so it's I gotta tell you, I'm not kidding when I say I love following your social media stuff, the crazy stuff you do, the fun stuff that you have, playing around with the other distillers and the other making all your spirits that you're doing, especially those parking lot cigars. It's
Absolutely. It's a tradition, at least, at the summer and winter solstice, parking
Yep,
lot cigars.
that's right. It's just like let the shenanigans begin. I love it. So Hood River, we're talking about the McCarthy's brand out of here. But maybe give us a background of yourself and how you got to Hood River and a little bit about the company.
Well, I think I'm going to start with the companies, and then I'll
Hmm,
find my way to
that
me
works
at
just
some
fine.
point.
Take us on a little
Because
journey.
yeah, I'm going to take you on a little journey. Come along with me, children, as we go on a journey. So McCarthy's is actually a brand of Clear Creek Distillery. So the best way to describe how the company works together, I use the solar system because it's something we're all familiar with. And I've chosen Saturn for Clear Creek Distillery because, let's be honest, it's the dopest planet. But Hood River Distillers essentially acts as the sun, right? It's what powers all of it. It's the larger company. Clear Creek Distillery was actually founded in 1985 by a man named Steve McCarthy, who was inspired through his travels in Europe to start making European-style fruit brandies with the bounty of the fruit grown here in the Pacific Northwest. And then on a separate trip, he fell in love with American single malt, and that is how we find ourselves as the first American single malt. He had a small fruit distillery in Portland, and he decided, well, I've got this distillery, and craft beer is craft beering, and certainly Portland was one of the epicenters for that.
Hmm,
And so he was like, wouldn't it be dope if I came back? I'm sure that was exactly his words, by the
that's
way. Wouldn't
exactly
it
what he
be
said. Exactly.
dope if I
Be
came back to my
rad.
little distillery in Portland and
That's
talked to
right.
some of the craft maltsters, and because there's barley that grows in Oregon and there's peat
Yep.
in Oregon, which a lot of people don't know,
Hmm,
and I could make this Oregon single malt and age it in Oregon oak. And unfortunately, the answer from all of the malting houses at the time was absolutely not, because the moment you put that peat reek into the system, every craft beer that came through Portland would then be smoky and peaty. So at the time, his only option was to import the peat malted barley from Scotland, which is what we still do today. So it's made with
okay.
100% heavily peated barley imported from Scotland. And then we work with brewery partners. Now, fast forward to 2014, and Steve was 71 years old and ready to retire. And he was looking for a company that not only would continue his hard work and legacy as the third craft distillery in the country, but also a company that's well known for taking care of their employees. Because at the time, there were 10 people that were the total staff for Clear Creek Distillery. And so he went out and knocked on Hood River Distiller's door and was like, hey, do you want to buy my distillery? Because the universe is awesome, as it
Hmm,
turns out, Hood River Distillers was actually looking to get back to their production roots. Like you said, we are turning 90 as a company this year, and they were founded in 1934, doing the same thing Clear Creek was founded doing in 1985, which is making
wow.
fruit brandies from all the surplus fruit grown here in the Hood River Valley.
Sure.
Going into the War Department asked any distillery that had distilling equipment, would you please, 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 instead of making booze, make industrial alcohol for the
Hmm,
production of rubber and explosives? And HRD absolutely stepped up and pivoted to make industrial alcohol through the war effort. But on the other side of the war, Americans moved away from brandy and seemingly kind of stayed away from brandy, which is unfortunate for because it's an awesome category. But it also became really interested in clear spirits. And in the mid 50s, Hood River Distillers was purchased from the founders by 4 local families, the Dodge family being the largest of the 4 families in ownership size, and continues to be owned by those families to this day. And so here we are and 90 years later. And so in 2014, they had a check to buy a still. And then Steve knocks on the door and they're like, well, yeah, absolutely. Why would we start from scratch trying to figure out how to be brandy distillers again and vodka and whiskey distillers? Why don't we buy, a full staff of spirits nerds and all of the equipment to boot, and a brand that has had a long-standing career of respect within the industry and within the consumers as well. So it was really kind of the stars aligned, which brings me back to the solar system example. So Clear Creek really kind of operates within itself. So I'm the head distiller up here at Clear Creek. Sometimes it feels a little bit like an island. And then we have our 2 distillers, Garrett Trotter and Everett Rubin here as well. But McCarthy's is being increasingly treated as an independent brand because for the large part, Clear Creek Distillery is a brandy distillery. And then also we happen to be making the first American single malt. And so I kind of describe that as essentially the rings of Saturn. And then because we're also one of 2 production facilities for Hood River, we also create, distill, and send to the bottling plant a few other independent brands like Timberline Vodka, Old Delicious, apple brandy. We do a finished line of bourbons as well. And then the DeGroff, Amaro, and Aperitivo we just released over the last year. So we have a lot of liquids that we're responsible for. I think there's 33 different liquids that come out of here. And those independent brands for the solar system model essentially act as the moons around Saturn. But we have a sister distillery making gin up in Seattle called Big Gin. And I did Neptune for Alex Myers because it's the second dopest planet. But that's kind of the interaction. But with Hood River Distillers in total, I mean, I should probably eventually one of these days get an official number of brands, but I would say that Hood River Distillers is managing, 60 to 70 different brands. They after the 50s, they quit producing and they became what would have pre-prohibition been termed as a rectifier. So they were buying bulk spirits and then blending and bottling underneath all of these different brands and creating new products. So with the purchase of Clear Creek Distillery and Big Gin, that was the return to ownership of production from raw material all the way through final product. We also have, strangely enough, not strangely enough, but it's really awesome. Over 90 years, you make a lot of friends. And so we actually have a really long-standing relationship with Casa Orandine down in Tequila. And so not only have we been importing their misto for a really long time, we're also now the importer and in charge of sales for the Batanga tequila as well. So we have in our portfolio a white and also a reposado tequila, which is a lot of fun. So essentially, if you were to look at the Hood River Distillers portfolio, the whole solar system of everything that we make, we could outfit an entire bar from A to Z. And there's only a couple things like Angostura bitters that you would need to buy outside of our portfolio. So there's a lot to talk to from the company standpoint. And then where I fit in, you talked about following my Instagram, so you already know that I grew up a farmer. Murphy and I actually share a few things in common as being like wine kids in middle school. I think I've talked to him a couple times about getting sent back to the bathroom to like rewash our hands from being in the lunch line at school because the teachers are like, those hands are filthy. I know you didn't wash them. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. I was in the basement crushing grapes with my hands with my dad all weekend. And this is like stained from the grapes. It's tannins that I literally can't wash off. So my parents actually started a winery when I was in middle school. And so not only was I, farming with my, I was the lead combine driver, only combine driver by 12, which if any of you have 12-year-old children, imagine putting your 12-year-old child in a piece of equipment that's worth $500,000. That's the livelihood of your entire family and being like, good luck, I'm going to go to work. You're going to be fine.
Keep it straight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we're not going to talk about how straight my lines were when I was 12, but you know what? I got the job done.
That's right.
Anyways, so I caught the fermentation bug at a fairly early age, and I was very fortunate that Oregon State University, which was 3 hours from home, has one of the premier food science departments. So I got a fermentation degree, and during my degree, I didn't realize how little I knew about spirits. And I'm gonna age myself. I know you were so kind about talking about how young I must look. But at the time, there was very little information on the internet about spirits at all. It's so interesting to me that there are groups like yours, that there are all these fun tasting groups, that there's societies, there's Discord channels, there's all these really fun ways to find information about the brands you love and how everything is made. And that just wasn't the case when I was in college. And so really the only alternative to learn more about distilling and how spirits were produced was to get a job at a distillery. And so my last term at Oregon State, I sent I sent a letter to every distillery in the Pacific Northwest, which at the time was 12. And I was being very generous with the boundaries of what was considered the Pacific Northwest at the time. And so, I mean, now it's several hundred in that geographical area. So it's been an amazing 14 years, not only as a part of the tapestry and the stories and the legend of Clear Creek Distillery, but also to be a part of craft distilling as we've grown and matured to become what we are today.
No, I love it. Yeah, when you get caught in all the brands that are on the shelf and then the distribution, what you have only in front of you and everything like that. When you start unpacking what's at Hood River and what you do at Clear Creek and all the products, especially the brandy lines, it hits us cocktail folks and folks that like to drink curious, like our friend over at Whiskey Fellows and everybody. And I know the Ewalds are going nuts over here. Adina said, "Ooh, heat! Finally!" It's like there's some hounds like us out here too as well. That just it's nice seeing being able to experiment and try new things and find new things, and especially have a portfolio like you have that you're distilling, and how you've come out throughout the whole entire time. I mean, starting at driving a combine at 12, then working stills and this, that, and the other, just working your way through it. It's nice seeing some other stories that are out there that we may not be familiar with.
Well, I tell you what, if you ever want to have me back on for me to go through a few brandies, I'm happy to do brandy education.
We are, yes. I am looking. I'm already piecing together a group of people that I think would be a hell of a panel on brandy, and bringing that back on and doing a brandy night because yes,
Awesome.
absolutely. I'm sure some of our friends from the Black Forest of Indiana would probably be very interested in doing something like that. I think we'd have a hell of a time with that one. Be a lot of fun. All right, let's take us through McCarthy's. This is the first American single malt. That's a lot of folks don't know. I think some other people try to say they're the first and everything like that, but the history shows differently, and the product stands absolutely up for itself. What's unique about this McCarthy's product line that you have, and let's tell a little bit about that and the spirit that we're talking about tonight.
Well, I would like to say, as far as anybody that I wouldn't, it's ungracious to say that people tried to claim the first, because McCarthy's is still a really small brand. I think highly regarded, but definitely small.
Sure.
And so I think there was just a lack of knowledge. We certainly were we were never salty at people that were using that as their marketing. So I want to go on record as that.
Correct.
I'd also
Absolutely.
like to go on record that the only reason that I even mention it is because the marketing team would shoot me if I didn't. It really goes against both mine and my predecessor, Joseph Sullivan, need to be shy and humble to put that stake in the ground that says we're the first. We really actually pushed against it even being on the label. And we actually had several people that we asked to please prove us wrong. And it turns out we've been independently proven to be the first American single malt by a handful of years by a few people. But yeah, it's not the American single malt movement isn't because of McCarthy's exist. American single malt movement is because everybody essentially had the great idea within about 10 years of each other. I think there might be a few that looked at McCarthy's and was like, well, if those weirdos in Portland can do it, we can too. But I do know for a fact that so many of the over 250 American single malt producers across the country were just like, hey, single malt's cool. We should do that. Oh, it's delicious. Let's keep doing that. So a few humble caveats to it.
100%. Well, it is amazing how fast the category has gone and how people have picked up and whatever you want to just try new things. Like we talked about before, it's amazing. Oh, all bourbon comes from Kentucky, and we could say that all day long. But it's amazing how the education is still out there and lack thereof, or whatever. But this category is really it's been coming out of its own already. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of people just taking it out to understand what's on the label
Yeah.
and giving it a try.
Yeah.
And it's the folks of everybody that's on here that have started this stuff and picked up and running, and some other friends of the program that continue to carry that torch and just tell the story, but we tell it our way, and that's just
Yeah,
what
I
it is.
actually just got recently like sworn at by some friends that have a really amazing bourbon channel called the Bourbon Van. If I'm going to go ahead and call them out, I wasn't going to call them out, but like they're amazing people, and you should go watch their travels, Phil and Julie's
Yep.
travels. But they sent me a note on Instagram, and they were like, just so you know, we kind of hate you and McCarthy's because we're a bourbon channel and we're spending all of our time interviewing American single malt people. They actually just spent some time with Mark, and they were like, we're supposed to be talking about bourbon. Our channel's literally called Bourbon Van, and like half of our stuff is American single malt now. And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We didn't mean to convert you, but like, I'm okay with you being converted at the same time.
There's a reason why our founder here named this our flagship whiskey, because we're just whiskey lovers across the board. Now, if you talk to him about some stuff from our cousins across the pond, he'll say that's why we have American single malt and bourbon, because we do better things here. Why continue
Sure.
to do traditional the old ways? But we
Mhm.
also used to lick lead paint too, as well as kids, and look how that turned out. So you can be can't be you don't have to be held hostage by tradition,
Sure.
and you can respect it and still appreciate the category. But it
Mhm.
is just fun with what
Absolutely.
everyone is doing in this category.
So to get
It is
back to your
crazy.
original question, before I wander too much further away, you talked about, you asked, let's talk about McCarthy's. What makes McCarthy special? There are a number of interesting things about McCarthy's that are special. Like I said, we're using 100% peat malted barley imported from Scotland. It is a heavily peated malt. So really, considering the ppm and considering the mash bill, it should absolutely be a tire fire that would rival the best tire fires coming out of the Isla region of Scotland. But because of the way that we're treating this whiskey and distilling it, it's something a little bit special. It's actually not traditionally double pot distilled like a Scottish single malt might be. It's a single distilled in a hybrid German brandy still. Which means, and these stills, two of the stills, they're approaching 40. Their Creek Distillery turns 40 next year, to Hood River's 90 this year. So these stills they've been doing the Lord's work for a really long time. And there's a
Banged
few
around.
places
Nice.
that might be a little thin when you tippy tap your fingernails across the shoulders. But they've been making a lot of really beautiful things for a really long time. And what that means is, even though they're already 60-gallon pot stills with a short column on the top and a copper deflameter, so there's a lot of copper contact that you're getting in it already, as even if it was brand new. With all of that time, with all of that history, slowly dripped into all of the corners of that copper, you have all of these rivulets and pits that are cut within the totality of that copper. And so it is an immense amount of copper contact that this spirit gets before it comes out the other side. So it's a very big, bold, and heavy spirit because of the single distillation, but we've also managed to react out a great deal of the lion's share of the sulfur components because of the amount of copper contact. So instead of digging under a diesel tractor and a tire fire to find the redeeming qualities out of what it could potentially be considered a challenge dram, instead you have full access to all of the beautiful, earthy, and delightfully smoky notes that peat has to offer, as well as some of the like crackery and also fruit notes from the barley and the fermentation itself. The other really neat thing about the McCarthy's is it's aged 100% in Oregon oak and Gary on oak. Gary on oak is really difficult to tame, and what
It's very
should
polarizing.
be, yeah, absolutely, what should be a combative flavors within the glass, within the bottle, this big heavy oak, this big heavy heavy peated whiskey. Instead, it's this beautiful marriage. They both complement each other and tame each other. And so you have this really interesting mix of flavors between the big, bold oak as well as the malt whiskey in the glass. And they're
Generally
not
just
charred. They're medium toast.
medium toast, no char. Love it.
We're
So
a medium
Darren came
toast.
in. Yeah, the combination of the deep peaty smokiness and then a beautiful fruit behind the peat is just perfect peated whiskey. The Ewald said exactly right. Kyle Neely came in. Nose reminds me of an Oregon Trail campfire, hopefully without the cholera. Kyle, let's talk about that. Some people like you had me at Pete's. They love it. Mark here again. Leave it to the marketing guy too as well. Smoked ham hock, heavy sea breeze across smoldering campfire with roasted seaweed. I picture him wearing a shearling coat with corduroy outside with some jeans, potentially black colored jeans and hiking boots with this too as well, if you can picture that one up. Start to finish is bright and citrus peel, but a lingering note that is a beautiful peat. Your brandy is out of this world, by the way. Also, those eau de vies from Clear Creek are spectacular. From Jason, it reminds me of Balvenie Peat Weeks, wood smoke that clings to your clothes after camping. Yes, Caitlin's brandies are fire from the Ewalds. Sean Baquette has a new cologne now with this nose. Murphy, the classic production team versus marketing team debates, which we can go on at another time, I'm sure. So these are contagious. What's the parts per million on the peat side since you brought it up?
Between 40 and 50.
40 and 50. Very good.
Yeah, it's big. It's a big boy. It's so funny. It's actually been kind of a real treat. Our newest distiller, Everett Rubin, we poached him from our brewery partner. So for the first time, we have somebody on the production team that's brewed McCarthy's as well as distilled it, and he's learning.
Wow.
He's learning about the aging side of it. But he almost followed a tanker of wash up the hill. Double Mountain. I've been a proud partner for going on 7 or 8 years now. But they're located 2.5 miles down the hill here in Hood River. So there's a tanker company that works for a juice company at the very bottom of the hill. So they go a mile to the brewery and then 2 miles to the distillery to deliver the wash. So whenever we can, the ethos and the idea, not only between Clear Creek, but Hood River as well, is to always work with the local community, the local companies as much as you can. And so we definitely want to make sure that we call them out, but it has been fun. I think he called it hot dog water when he first got here. He's definitely more of a bourbon guy than a peat guy. And so, but he's coming around. I'm gonna indoctrinate him. He's been here for about 6 months. He's already a much bigger fan of McCarthy's than he started being. And it really started with the opportunity to actually experience it as it's coming off the stills, to experience not only the smell in the distillery, the smell of your clothes when you go home, which I describe as kind of awkward bacon. But I've grown to love it, and that was specifically to make Mark laugh. But yeah, so it's fun to see him kind of come around to it after having the opportunity to really soak in all the flavors and aromas that you can get from the new make. And that's before you even start talking about the Oregon oak and the aging process.
I'm going to quote you on any time somebody talks to me about peat as awkward bacon. That's now your coined phrase. That's what you get. And so it's what I love about this expression, I think the most for me is the sweetness that comes out of the distillate and everything. Everything pulls forward to the tip of the tongue for me on this one. It just slowly unpacks. You have the smoke for the keeping you warm at night and everything. You got that Oregon sweater on the finish that keeps on pulling forward, but then it just pulls the sweetness. And it's like, how do you get sweetness out of peat? It's because you got to look past it. It's just part of the distillate. Let the barley shine here. It's going to be there. Just wait for it and give them a try. Not everything's Band-Aids, iodine, and dumpster fire.
Yep, absolutely. There's a lot more to that peat, and there's a reason that it's so widely celebrated.
Correct. I think it's a good way to. The Ewalds just came in. It's a good band name, Awkward Bacon. I would also go with peanut butter. Yeah, peanut butter and dreadlocks.
Funny. So I am the only. I'm the only one. Well, I guess now that Everett's part of the team, we've got 2 single people. But traditionally, over the history of McCarthy's, at least my history, I've been the only one that's lived alone. And so everybody else, their partners are always relegating their clothes to a separate room, or making them change in garages, or leave their clothes in their car and wash them in separate laundry loads. And I live alone, so so I don't care. But also, I love that smell. So it's kind of like when I walk past the laundry hamper and we're distilling McCarthy's that week, it's like it's kind of nice to have that little reminder when I'm walking around my house. But yeah, no, Garrett's wife, Loretto, absolutely makes him wash all of his McCarthy's clothes in a separate load of laundry and keep them in a separate laundry basket.
Well, it happens. It's part of the job. So, Caitlin, thank you very much for taking us through this product and the history of the company, and understanding that Saturn and the Moons is Clear Creek and the coolest planet out of them all. It's dope. Also, like to thank Laura Pete for helping us pull everybody together here. So for Sam, Murphy, Mark, Caitlin, thank you very much for the time. We appreciate it. We're going to turn off the recorder here, so let's say bye to everybody else on YouTube. Thank you very much. Take care, everybody, and we'll be back next week with Gin Night as well. It's a little fun gin night, and Caitlin, we're going to talk about brandy night as well. So that'll be coming down the pipeline here. This is going to be something. I love it. All right, everyone, take care. Appreciate you joining us. We'll see you next week.